Emotions are energy in motion. If I stagnate them, if I suppress them, if it's not okay for them to flow, now I'm actually not moving. I'm just running on this hamster wheel. If I unlock the emotions and kind of go for that ride, the heavier stuff definitely probably needs somebody to work through. With the most intensive things we've ever felt in our life, we probably don't want to go through that alone. Okay, that's where we need a guide. Most things like subtle annoyances, things like that. It's because of the emotions not so tense. Like I can get to more an objective place with that faster because it's just like, or I just might need to run it by somebody else. It doesn't have to be a big process if it's just kind of a subtle thing, but the bigger stuff generally needs some type of support. And so just kind of seeing that how I'm relating to something, and if it's not moving, if it's stuck, well, I need to feel more around that area because that's going to be my information needed to get to my next level with it.
I think one thing you said there is worth repeating or taking a note on, and that I hadn't necessarily thought of until you literally just said it. And that is that emotions are energy in motion. I think that's I don't know. I just think that's worth noting as a way to think about it. Maybe that
Mhm.
helps with the permission.
Yeah, and it's like so but our conscious mind, like we can stop things. So I can stop the flow. If I consciously focus on something and I say like, no, that's not okay. Now I stagnated the energy. And so we feel that in our nervous system as a contraction. If I reject something, my body contracts. That doesn't allow like anything to flow from that place. All these things are quite literally like we do control things with our mind, right? It's like, oh, like this isn't allowed, so I'm going to suppress it. And now my body's tense and in stressed. If we're not allowing things the space to move, that's what happens. And then it's not okay, so I'm going to suppress it and I'm going to pretend it doesn't exist, but it does exist, and there's actually pain underneath there. And so that's going to be creating all these distortions in how I'm operating my life. That's when I've suppressed so much that I'm totally dissociated from what I feel, now feedback doesn't even help me because I've refused to even look at it. So it's just like all this stuff's like stacked up. And so people get delusional in that place where they're not in tune with reality because their version that they're telling themselves is totally detached from what's actually going on. But you'll see this a lot with like emotional intelligence, where people can be like really awkward and bad with other people, right? But then in their mind, it's always that other person's fault, right?
Right.
But it's the energy they're showing up to the situation. That's what the reality is. If I'm tense and anxious and all that stuff, but if I've totally suppressed and dissociated from my emotions, I'm not in tune with anything going on. I'm just stuck in my head and whatever it's telling me. Accepting responsibility is actually accepting responsibility for what you feel, because that's where our story is. That's where all these unresolved things are. On some level, I have to address those because the more I suppress them, it's just the more numb I get. And over time, that starts to add up to, like health complications, all sorts of things, because we have chronic stress is what leads to everything. So if I have this stress in place that I refuse to look at, that stress is going on 24/7 in my entire life. I might not be in tune with it, but it's there. And you'll
Mhm.
see this in the way people's, body language, they're going to be very tight. They're going to be locked up because they're not in their body. Like everything's just suppressed.
Sure.
So and, the interesting thing, with athletes and stuff like that, it's kind of interesting to kind of dive deeper into that, being, well, okay, you're limiting yourself and it's actually showing up in how you move. And this is like a mental pattern. So that's this mind body connection is super important. And well, there's so many layers and levels to it. The way I address this is, well, if it's causing tension, there's something to learn there. And we want to unpack it and not leave it in a negative place.